Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
A lot of what we talk about, yes, it's about the U.S. economy. It's also connected to what's going to happen with the election.
Yeah, the Pew Research Center out with a survey back in September. It indicates that even though Black registered voters overwhelmingly support Vice President Kamala Harris, Joe Biden in 2020 actually fared better. It's a bit of apples and oranges here, so bear with me, of those statistical folks out there. You know, it's a survey versus what actually happened in the election. So in 2020, 92% of Black voters voted for Biden, while 8% voted for Trump. Today, Carol, 84% of Black voters say they'd vote for Harris. 13% would vote for Trump. That's if the election were held today, again, according to Pew.
All right, so let's see what our next guest has to say about this. Adrianne Shropshire is certainly familiar with these trends. She's executive director of BlackPAC. It's a Democratic political action committee that works to engage African American voters, and that's exactly what they're doing right now with less than a month to go until the election. She joins us from Los Angeles. So good to have you back with us. Why isn't Vice President Kamala Harris doing as well as Joe Biden did with Black voters? What's your take on that?
I agree that it's a little bit of apples to oranges comparison here. And so I think that when we're looking at, if we looked at where Joe Biden was with Black voters a month out, and I'm not looking at that at the data, but my recollection is that when we looked at the surveys, during the same period, I would guess that Joe Biden was in the 80s as well.
Yeah.
Election results are different. Right. And so it's a little bit of apples to oranges comparison. I think it is, looking at where he was in surveys and in polls where, just, a month out from the election is a better comparison. And I think that they're right in the same territory. I mean, she actually has, a pretty significant level of support among Black voters. I think that the what we're paying attention to is how that support, one, increased significantly. Like her support increased significantly once she moved to the top of the ticket, and we continue to see it tick up.
Okay. Interesting. What about when it comes to what you're seeing in terms of engaging younger voters? Are you seeing that they are engaged with Harris right now, or is that a struggle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of my take on where we are right now is that there is still just a lot of voters to reach. And that includes younger voters. It includes, Black men. It includes younger Black women. I think younger voters in general. And I think that, she has been running a campaign for just a little over 2 months, which, obviously is in a system like ours, that is a pretty short period of time to try and reach and convince voters to show up and vote. So, I think that we're seeing the support for her again increase. Is it where it needs to be? No. Are voters well positioned to receive the information? There's a lot of both, kind of digital communication that needs to continue to happen. There's a lot of door knocking that needs to happen to reach voters. I think that there's a lot of combating of mis and disinformation. I think that when we see, skeptical voters, oftentimes are voters who, are pretty undecided and uncertain about whether or not they're going to support the vice president. A lot of it is because they've heard information that's just inaccurate. And, we talk about misinformation and disinformation. Some of it's just straight propaganda.
Yeah.
But we know that fewer voters have been targeted.
Well, that's what I'm curious, though. When you talk to Black voters, what's top of mind for them? I mean, we obviously have talked so much about the economy, but also concerns about inflation. What is top of mind for, and I know it's hard to kind of lop everybody together, but in terms of Black voters, when you guys are out and about, what is top of mind where they think potentially or possibly that one candidate could be better over the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, no different than most of the country. And I think that this cuts across all the demographics, right, within the groups within the Black electorate. No different from other folks, the economy is top of mind. People are worried about costs. Obviously, that's everything from groceries to rent, and the ability to even buy a home. We hear that a lot. People feeling like they're just priced out, that they'll never actually own a home. So there's an affordability issue that people are deeply concerned about. But that's true for every election, right? The economy is the top issue for folks in every election. When we look at Black voters and what people identify as the top issues, there's a whole host of what I would say are issue angst that people have. So there is obviously the economy. People are deeply concerned about democracy, and so what gets wrapped up in that for people is people being concerned about the erosion of rights, whether that is the erosion of voting rights, whether that is the erosion of reproductive rights. People are concerned about gun violence, and particularly, the illegal guns that are on the street that cause, insurmountable suffering in communities. People are concerned about education.
So I'm glad you brought up guns. What did you make of Kamala Harris on 60 Minutes talking about her own Glock?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that, and this is obviously, this is a long-standing issue that for us comes up in every time that we're engaged in on the doors, talking to Black voters. The issue of crime in general, right? I think this is the other thing that I always feel like is an important distinction to make, is that oftentimes when Black voters talk about crime and they're concerned about crime, they are very specifically talking about gun violence, and looking for reforms and looking for ways to curtail the violence that people see on their streets in a daily on a daily basis in some cases. Yeah. And so it's a critical issue. I think that the vice president is right, and obviously, is clear about the importance of this issue in communities across the country, certainly, but within Black communities in particular, to be talking about this issue in ways that really are getting at how do we solve the problem. I think that there are ways in which prior to her ascendance to the top of the ticket, how they talked about what the administration had done in terms of gun reform was also, really important for the voters that we were talking about. So the number of people who hadn't heard, and when we talked about what the administration had done on this issue, increased their support for the administration. So I think to be drilling down on this issue is critical. And again, it's obviously in communities across the country, but this is a huge issue for Black voters.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, Adrianne. You got to come back before the election, which is less than a month away. Really do appreciate you taking the time. Adrianne Shropshire, she's executive director of BlackPAC. It's a Democratic Political Action Committee. Carol, you remember earlier this year,
yes,
we spoke to Rebecca and Josh Tickle.
Yes.
Remember that? The filmmakers
Very
behind
cool
the documentary Common Ground. They joined us from Ojai, all about regenerative farming and the movement in regenerative farming. It's the idea that soil health is everything, and food production and industrial farming essentially just wreak havoc on the environment. Instead, with regenerative farming, it undoes the damage that's been done for generations.
Yeah, regenerative farming is something that Camilla Marcus has focused on for years. She is the chef and founder of Westbourne. It was the first certified zero-waste restaurant in New York City. It's now an online foods business that has the goal to, quote, send nothing to the landfill.
She's also got a new cookbook out. It's called My Regenerative Kitchen, plant-based recipes and sustainable practices to nourish ourselves and the planet. She joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Welcome back to New York.
Thank you.
How much do you miss New York? Be honest with us.
A lot. I always say my heart's probably in Chicago because I'm born in Los Angeles, but my heart's definitely in New York. So,
but you're a Californian.
Myself kind of a Midwesterner.
You're a Californian now.
I am second generation LA native. Not many can say that.
So New York's done for now.
Never say never.
Okay.
I like to think of myself. I'm pretty bi-coastal. I'm here every 4 weeks. My firstborn was born in New York, and my kids definitely know everything about New York.
Okay, so we'll talk more New York. We got a nice chunk of time with you. I'm talking about New York because we got a lot of listeners and viewers in New York, Carol.
Okay.
They're familiar with the restaurant.
Okay.
So yeah, they got to know if she's coming back.
Go ahead. Got a question?
Yeah, I got a question.
Maybe I never left.
Explain the regenerative movement and sort of like how it found you, how you found it.
I really found the regenerative movement through my work in restaurants. I mean, I'm a professionally trained chef. I've worked worked for a bunch of different chefs and restaurateurs here in New York City. I had my own restaurant in Soho, and I think when you really dig into the supply chain, you're nothing without your farmers, right? Everything starts at the source. I always say sustainability and food quality and flavor start with our ground. And I really think it was sort of starting in that world about 15 years ago, meeting farmers and realizing the disconnect from who's shopping at a grocery store to what's happening at the earth and how vitally important that system is. It's the only system that can pull down carbon in time. For my generation that's obsessed with climate change, it sort of was this light bulb of why isn't every dollar and every effort that we have pouring into this system and into this massive land transition? And that's really our only hope to solve it.
And yet industrialized farming still exists.
We do a lot of things that aren't logical here in the States.
Well, I am curious, like in your process of building your restaurant and just learning more about this, that how entrenched it is and how difficult it is to shift to more regenerative farming. Can we do it? Like we talk about organic, I don't know, it's still probably smaller, right? Like in terms of...
Versus conventional?
Yeah. Like, so I'm just like, how do we get there? Because I feel like Chipotle was somebody who talked a lot about trying to do food production in a much, much better way and a regenerative way years ago. So I'm just like, how do we get there? Can we get there?
I think that's really the ethos of the book is if every single one of us made one decision today to do a regenerative practice in their home, whether that's buying a regenerative food at the grocery store, getting in touch with a regenerative farm. So many, especially now the internet, you can buy these products online direct,
right?
Direct from the source, cooking in a way that's a little bit more mindful of climate. If every single one of us did just one thing, we could turn the system on its head.
Am I moving the needle by composting?
Yes.
Really?
Drastically.
I do
Have
feel
you read the book? I share the data.
Share the
look
data.
at carbon. No, but the data's there. You look at the carbon capture. It turns your entire kitchen into being, carbon negative from carbon positive just by composting. And now there's so many home systems. There's no excuse.
Here's why I ask. In a city like New York, we now have composting citywide,
It's
but I can't imagine us doing this without having a weekly collection for compost. People live in multifamily, people live in apartments. It's not something they can definitely, necessarily just go throw in their backyard in a composter.
Except now there's companies like Lomi and Mill where you can absolutely do it anywhere. If you own a trash bin, you can own one of these systems and you absolutely can do it anywhere. It wasn't like it was even 3 years ago. Again, I think the technology, the startups, the support, the financial systems absolutely have made composting accessible.
And my understanding that more and more products are getting marked with regenerative, like they're noting it.
Indeed.
So that if you are looking to do the right thing, as you said, each of us can do it by buying a product, starting there. You can find the markings. Is that right? That's correct?
Absolutely. The jeans I'm wearing are regenerative cotton. We're partnering on this cookbook tour with Citizens of Humanity. They have the same mission and the same aha moment that I had, which is from the clothes you wear to the beauty products you use to what you're buying in a grocery store. We make more decisions about food and beverage in our daily lives than anything else.
I want to ask you costs, though. And I think about something
Get it
like
a lot.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what the cost is for things and whether this is just a small sliver of the economy that can actually, partake in this regenerative cycle.
I really don't agree that it's just down to cost. And I will say, because I think if you pair it with a more waste-oriented practice in your home, which is what the book, again, holistically is trying to explain. If you're thinking about quality over everything and less is more, upcycling things in your home kitchen, not throwing out food. I mean, we all know the stats. We throw out a lot of food in America. It's not that we don't grow enough to feed our communities. It's that we waste too much. If you really think about quality of ingredients, supporting these farms, supporting these products, but buying less and being more creative in how you cook, I think net, you'd have more of the masses participating.
We talk about this. Like I know in my household, like we're trying to shop more often. My daughter spent some time overseas and she's like, everybody shops daily. Yep. It's a very different
Eggs don't
way.
go in the refrigerator.
Right, exactly. But this quantity of that we have to have so much stuff, food or otherwise. I don't know how we, as a society, certainly here in the United States, get away from that.
I think the truth is we have to. I mean, I think that's what the book is trying to also siren a little bit is in a very beautiful and lovely way, sound the alarm of we kind of don't have a choice of continuing down the path. That's really the truth. So how do we change? Our hand's kind of being forced already, right? The climate crisis is looming. traditional industrial farming is not working, both from a health and a sustainability standpoint. We're not going to be able to grow more food if we don't change our ways.
So let's zoom out a little bit and talk
climate
about
change is reducing some of the land we've got.
Yeah,
right?
talk about some of the issues with modern farming, because I think when people go to the store, they don't necessarily realize that what they're buying may have been grown in a way that isn't necessarily good for the environment, and in fact is bad for the environment. I think regenerative, the concept of regenerative, is still very new to a lot of people and unfamiliar to a lot of people.
Yeah, my philosophy is always, I don't know that I care whether someone can define it. I don't think most people can define organic. It means pesticide and chemical free, but I don't think the average person is going to say that. It doesn't roll off the tongue. Same with regenerative. It's really all about the soil. Best way to remember it, soil's a 4-letter word. It's the thing we need to care the most about, and it's the most tied to our health. What's better for the earth is always better for our health. When we have farming practices that care about carbon in the soil and health of the soil, we get better for you foods that are higher in nutrient density.
Do you think the government needs to get involved and say, okay, these things
Absolutely.
are allowed, these things are not allowed?
Absolutely. Look, I always say follow the money, right? We are in an industrial stranglehold in agriculture because of the Industrial Revolution following World War II.
People would say that about fossil fuels in many ways, right?
Exactly.
But anyway, go ahead.
No, the context has changed, but the policies are still sort of stuck back in time. We say we need to be more progressive, go back in time before that industrialization. And the difference you asked about regenerative, the best way to think about it is, in one hand, you're holding that soil that you get when you're planting something in your home. It's black, it has organisms, it's wet, it's moist, versus picking up dirt around a tree, right, on the side of the road, or, here in Manhattan. One is chalky, dry, it's sort of a dull brown color. That's the difference between traditional farming and regenerative farming. I'm a visual person, so I like to think of it in that way.
But don't hate me for going back to this, but I mean, in terms of the cost of a regenerative farm, is it more expensive to do right now?
Again, I think it depends on how you look at it. Is it a shift in practices that require capital investment? Yes. Does it pay back and reset the farm? Absolutely. And the biggest long-term shift in that, and whether it costs more, to me, is those yields are going down. They are not, these existing farms that have industrial practices and traditional modern farming, they're not able to grow the same that they were last year, the year before, and the year before.
The soils, right?
So at some point, that cost structure is going to surpass. So maybe today there's an argument to say that, but I would argue that's the fallacy that the incumbents want you to believe. It's not actually true when you look at the next 7 years.
So where should we be getting our food?
Couple places. First, as locally as possible.
Yeah.
Most communities have some form of a farmer's market. I think second, thinking about, again, buying directly from farms. There's CSA boxes, dried products from all these incredible sources from around the country. And then third, going to your grocery store, asking for regenerative brands, talking to the manager, going on shelf and looking for that word regenerative. It's what I talk about in the book, from rice to pasta to sauces to our Westmorn avocado oil. All your basic staples now. There's a lot of brands out there doing the good work.
I think, it is no different than when we kind of shifted towards organic, right? And looking for it. And I think we all have figured out how to do that. What? You look like you wanted to ask something.
I think the Tickles told us the same thing,
Yeah.
to go to the grocery store and ask about this stuff, because we're kind of the front line of this.
Right.
The customer.
Always look at regenerative cotton, right? When Patagonia was one of the first to do, organic cotton, now it's table stakes to have organic cotton in your wardrobe.
How often do you find that, organic cotton? I'm trying to think, like when I go shopping.
Organic cotton now is really sort of the baseline, I think. Even,
is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even at, again, accessible mass market companies and brands, organic cotton's everywhere. It wasn't 10 years ago. Now regenerative textiles is the next wave, like I said, from jeans to, upcycled products for your sunglasses, your glasses that you're wearing. I think you're seeing it actually more trailblazing in fashion and beauty, and I think food's behind, which is what we're trying to catch up.
No, I think it's it's funny because we've done a lot too on fashion, and I think the fashion industry increasingly is looking at its impact on the environment. Camilla, we're gonna take a break for a moment, but do you feel like you get the audiences that you want to kind of spread this message?
Yeah, we want everyone.
No, I don't mean just like us, but I mean, like, listen, I don't know, do industrial farmers, will they talk? Like, are they open to changing their ways?
Look, 50% of American land is still farmland, which I think most people are very surprised. All of that land
50%.
is 50%.
I always
of American
feel like
land.
it when we take a West Coast trip, which we're getting ready to do. Like, I love watching at the plant, and I'm like amazed at how much farmland is out there.
That's where our food comes from.
Mostly
California, though.
All right,
mostly
all right,
like
all
the
right.
last bit of the flight.
You're just really funny today, aren't you?
Super funny, yeah.
Don't talk about animals in the storm, okay? Just don't go there. No, but it's just interesting. I do wonder if they're open to making those changes.
Like I said, the writing's on the wall. We have to remember that most farmers live on their land and they're seeing how the environment has impacted their yields. I think the choice of A or B doesn't exist as much anymore.
We're going to come back, continue with Camilla Marcus, talk about her book, My Regenerative Kitchen. This is Bloomberg. Let's get back to our conversation. We're talking with Camilla Marcus. She is the chef and founder of Westbourne. It was the first certified zero-waste restaurant in New York City. It's now an online foods business. She is the author, too, of a new book, My Regenerative Kitchen, Plant-Based Recipes and Sustainable Practices to Nourish Ourselves and the Planet. And she is right here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Your story, though, you started a restaurant. Take us back there. 2018, I believe.
Yeah.
Not an easy thing to do.
If it were easy, everyone would do it. That's what my dad always said.
Tell us about that process.
Oh, gosh.
And what you learned.
Look, opening a restaurant business, period, in this country is very hard. Unfortunately, the country's not so supportive of small businesses. And it's interesting, right? Restaurants are the second largest employer next to healthcare. And yet, they hire more people per square footage. And yet, again, we talked earlier about following the money. Very little incentives. Most restaurants pay 30% in corporate taxes when you tally it all up. Kind of brutal when you compare it to other businesses that employ a lot less Americans. So it's tough. The cards are stacked against you, but I think we're all crazy and for the love of the game and the impact that it can make, I think, on connecting the food system to all of us in the public. It's powerful.
What do you think is the long-term effect or long-term consequence of what restaurants went through during the pandemic?
Oh, big question. Look, I think
because
fundamentally...
you were very involved in trying to save restaurants. You were out there lobbying for these small businesses.
Trying to save your own.
That was a big part of it.
I helped start Roar here in New York, where we did cash assistance along with the Robin Hood Foundation, as well as the Independent Restaurant Coalition, which is still in existence, working tirelessly. The team is still activated. So I would say the overhang and sort of the pain of it all is still there. I mean, look at what's happening now, in the southern part of this country with the hurricane. It's hard enough to operate these businesses. It really got crushed during the pandemic, and I don't think anyone's really come out of it. And then you continue to get just really heavy regulation. Every time, when we even talked about penalty, right? You look at the straw ban. Amazon doesn't get a plastic ban, but restaurants somehow, have to constantly go through hoops of, you have to accept cash. You can't do straws. There's all these regulations that come down so that it's a nice headline, but where's really the support for an industry that's always been a big game changer when it comes to agriculture, right? Everything we learn about biodiversity often comes from restaurants. You learn about new ingredients, new farming techniques. We talked about organics. So much of that language comes from when you dine out and you learn from chefs around the country who are usually the first adopters. And yet we don't really have writ large government support for making these strong, viable businesses that are critically important to our farming system, important to feed people, and massive employers.
Camilla, why doesn't that happen? Here we are in an election year. Is it the lobby group isn't strong enough or donating enough? I'm just curious because, as you say, follow the money. In politics, that's true in terms often of who gets heard.
I think it's that, but I also think it's the nature of the business. During the pandemic, one of our big taglines was, we are each a small business technically, but collectively we're obviously a massive industry. I think that's part of the problem is, right, you look at aerospace, there's a handful, you can count on your hands how many players that the government has to negotiate. I think we get written off because it's, everyone's so different. It's a bunch of small businesses. Who knows what the owners want? But there are very similar through lines through all of them. And I think it's really just the being very daunted that there's so many players involved versus seeing it as a bigger industry like a healthcare, which it is.
Is there also local rules and laws versus federal? I'm just curious.
Local, state, federal. I mean, you name it.
Right, for
and
restaurants.
Look, it's great headlines. You guys know you're in the news business. Yeah. Everything's about clickbait and splashiness. And when you regulate a restaurant or you come down hard on things related to labor, real estate, again, food, it all makes for really good headlines when you pass a regulation, but they don't really think about the ripple effects.
Want to talk about the book?
Yeah, I want to get back to the book. Kind of.
I can go
because,
deep on that, you know.
You said nothing's off limits, so I have some really important questions. We have kids that are like the same age. My 5-year-old is a very picky eater.
I love these questions.
What are you cooking for your kids, and how do you get them to eat it?
So I'm going to go back, which is one, grow something in your house. It's a big tenet of the book. I find that children look at food totally differently. Even if you do windowsill herbs and you have them putting herbs in their own dish, quote unquote cook, my son can literally cook his own meal at a stove with a knife. They understand cutting boards. They know knife safety. My 3.5-year-old fully can chop things for me. Have them participate in meals, but it really starts at the source. Grow something, have them watching my children understand that a strawberry takes a certain amount of time, that a squash is something that they took care of every single day for months. There's a very different, most kids, I would be shocked if a child wouldn't eat something that they actually grew. It's like the part of being human and having an ego. Play into that with your own children. Give them authorship. It's very hard not to get into it when you're part of it. So grow something, include them in cooking, and then give them a lot of agency and choice. Put out different sauces, have them decide. My kids also do our grocery shopping. They go to the grocery store, they go to our farmer's market, and they have to live up to what we call Top Chef challenges. They have to pick a new fruit or vegetable every single month. They have to try something new. Our rule in our house is you don't have to like it, but you have to try it. You can't just refuse. And then we talk about, what are we going to have this week? What are we going to try? What are you into? What did you like? What did you not like? But I think also making it very interactive and giving them a form of agency of, okay, you can have broccoli, but first of all, there's many kinds of broccoli out there. And let's talk to the farmer. My kids have to pay. They have to actually procure their own produce. And then when we cook, let's talk about grilling. Let's talk about, roasting. Let's talk about steaming. Let's talk about raw. And we talk about all those different things and how they can make it different ways. Again, giving them agency. And then I'd say lastly, educate. Kids love information. Talk about what each fruit and vegetable is doing in their body. I mean, my kids will use the word vitamin C. I mean, my 3-year-old knows what that means. Talk about, does it help your eyes? Does it help your bones? Does it help your muscles? And then how does that relate to their day and being higher performance and fuller?
I just want to make the honey nut squash with fried squash seeds. 30 seconds.
I did that over the weekend.
30 seconds. Who is this book for?
Everyone. It really is. Again, it doesn't mean you have to adopt it all, but I get a lot of questions about kids and families and who's it for, the cost. Every single one of us could pick one thing out of that book and do it and adopt it and feel really excited and fulfilled after. I promise you will feel better, and you'll realize that it's actually not that hard to make that change. You'll tell a friend, they'll tell a friend, and we spread it like wildfire.
And I feel like the world is increasingly, at least in my circle, moving towards those plant-based diets increasingly. Camilla, thank you so much. This was fun.
Thank you.
Good luck. Camilla Marcus, My Regenerative Kitchen, plant-based recipes and sustainable practices to nourish ourselves and the planet. I know what you're doing tonight.
It's squash season.
I love squash.
I spent all weekend cooking squash.
Show your kids all the varietals and go make it different ways. Get them involved.
All right, everybody, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek.
Thank you.